Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. The title is Non-Local Spirits and Local Machines. And I want to speak about how all the identities of human beings are hovering in language. And this linguistic simulation is a similar relationship, just like this guy in the wallpaper. And there's this concept of questions on the spirit in the machine. You see, there's a sort of philosophical idea that yes, the objective realm, what is visible to us appears mechanical, working based on certain mechanisms, based on certain laws, as if there's some certain ways the gears of the world are moving before we suddenly pop out as our own gear. So the concept of the spirit in the machine, or even we can say there was a philosopher that acknowledged it as brain in a gat. So pretty much it was this idea that what if we are thinking we're human beings, but our brain is just somewhere else. It's just the brain. In other words, the whole notion of human beings opening up to a potential that this world is simulated. It's simulated from a different location. What that means is if an alien didn't know what robots are, landed in Earth and saw a human being inside a giant robot, that alien, if it couldn't see the human being inside the robot, couldn't tell that this robot, for example, there's a human being inside. There's a spirit in the machine. And the whole idea, you see, there has been a fragmentation that occurred that in some sense differentiated the Western Enlightenment and the Eastern Enlightenment. If you notice, the Eastern Enlightenment was going closer to God, if the Western Enlightenment was going further away, because the values of defining freedom were different. In Eastern traditions, you'll see there's more discipline simply because their ancestors were more stricter in their values, you know. I summarize it like this, that in Eastern traditions, discipline is prioritized over freedom because discipline is seen as long-term freedom. But in Western culture, I've noticed a pattern where it's as if freedom is more important than discipline. And there are so many people who, for example, fight for freedom, but the moment they go into a different state, a state where their discipline has not prepared them for, they get toasted. So what that means is, let me tell you, right now, any human being has the potential to get overwhelmed. That's part of life. You know, if you don't get overwhelmed throughout the week, I don't know what you're looking at in life. There's many forces. That's the cool thing about life. When you're young, you feel these forces overpower you. You don't engage. You don't let who you are be expressed in the world. But when you realize that there isn't enough time, you're only on stage 100 years. Do you know, when life becomes a performance, there's an inseparability between the individual activity and the cosmic activity. You know, sometimes when I talk, I'm like, look at this remarkable sentence the universe just said. So, this idea of the spirit in the machine. Yeah, guys, that's my future self, you know, in 200 years sitting on that machine. Welcome to the chat, Jake. And I want to explain the spirit and the machine idea a bit more further for you, because it is one of the most important philosophical dilemmas of our era. It is pretty much where the mystery of consciousness and the hard problems of consciousness have led us to. That it's as if on some level, in trying to find the movement of the most essential part of our intelligence, we are finding limitations in our linguistic explanation. That means either consciousness is explainable, our language is not evolved, you know, or our language is evolved and consciousness is not explainable. You see the paradigms? Let me tell you guys, when you realize your mind is a flashlight and the world is like this dark forest and that you are designed as a creature to go and observe and act, you will feel so relieved. So many people look for the purpose of life, but they only look for the purpose of life in the cultural program, in a social setting. Do you know? No, not. I don't know how many people wonder. Wait a minute. Why is there life here? So here, guys. Yeah, exactly. Check this out. So, Ghost in the Machine is an idea brought forth by a British philosopher named Gilbert Ryle. And it's his way of kind of describing Rene Descartes' mind body dualism. The same way Gilbert Ryle used Ghost in the Machine, I use the inner realms and the outer realms, the objective realm and the subjective realm, and even beyond that, which is the language threshold, where language, literally, we don't have words for an experience that's happening. You know, the language threshold, guys, I feel this is one of the most important words in our species. You know, I'm happy I caught on to it quick, or I would have to. I don't know what to say. Sometimes you can't argue with the unknown. You just have to redirect your knowledge, your attention. So Rene Descartes' mind-body dualism, guys. You know, it's as if like we're evolving from acknowledging ourselves from just the limitation of one dimension and narrow approach of perception. What we are realizing happening in the world through especially overpopulation is an advantage that more eyes are looking at the grand questions, the grand challenges. You know, and that's the cool thing. At least one thing that's working for the educational system is that it is managing to get people to information. But what it is not managing to do is put an interesting enough context or an inspired enough context for the student to, in some sense, dive in. You know what that means? That means imagine in the future the educational system is paying students. And students, instead of going into gang violence or some other activity, instead of going to try to survive in a jungle like economy, they in some sense realize that knowledge has a value. You see, right now in this world of ours, the educational system is it's kind of strange. It's like it's in Western culture where freedom is crucial, but it's being run by a dynamic where it's as if the educational system was made at a time of war. You know, in the 1900s, British soldiers had to, in some sense, run from one bunker, memorize information and all the things from one bunker and run to the other bunker and be able to perfectly repeat it. So you can imagine that a country at the time of war will most likely have an educational system that is helping its military, because a nation at war has to defend itself in all avenues. You know, that means, believe it or not, war is this strange situation where national identity solidifies to prepare for its destruction. Do you know that means it was Leo Tolstoy, this Russian philosopher, made a very big point of this, where he was saying he has this letter he wrote or something called Bethink Yourselves. And you can check the audiobook online. But in that Bethink Yourselves, Leo Tolstoy says that it was as if in the Russo-Japanese war, the Japanese emperor was looking at his men and his people and saying, the universe is with us, and the Tsar was looking and saying, God is with us, you know? And it was as if every nation was painting their own imaginations into reality. Sometimes when I look at what a desire is, it's a movement of the inner realms that is choosing to be stopped in the outer realm. Like when a child has a toy, you take the toy, the child cries, you give the toy back, it's like the desire of the child is met. It gives itself permission. So the most important thing about desires being fulfilled is that you're self-authorizing, right? Self-authorization is very crucial because you could be existing in the most able place, in the most with the most able resources, but you might not have given yourself permission to be able. And this is the thing that it was in kind of they studied this. Dan Bilzerian was making a point of this in Joe Rogan podcast. You know, Dan Bilzerian was saying that some people kind of, he's a poker player, and he said that, a professional poker player, and he said some people just come and they don't feel they earned the money, so they're just there subconsciously to lose. And these shark poker players kind of know this new kind of thing that happens in casinos with new people coming in where they feel they don't deserve the money, so the guy goes on a losing streak. Now that's a system. That means a businessman looks at a business for how beautiful of a business it is, but then also looks at the moral dimensions that the self and the business permits. I am just realizing that what if we right now are remotely controlled by a field? I am I have really suspected this. It has been like I've observed the objective realm, I've observed the subjective realm, and I'm like, who's doing the observing? And I'm saying, how can I be something that I'm also looking at? The only example of this we find is the human body. You know? Guys, I'll tell you something hilarious. There was a time where I felt, this was years ago, when I was still kind of, I hadn't found my inner realms yet, but I was kind of like awakening to them. And so I remember I had this sort of one moment I was sitting down on a table and I was like, something feels off. Something feels off. And I had my hands just stretched out on the table, kind of like imagine sitting at like an office table. And I'm like, something feels off. And I'm like, is this my intuition? Is this my sensory perception? Is some event happening in the world? Is this something? And then you know what? I realized there's a pen. My hand, my right, like right above my elbow of my right arm there was a pen there, and my arm was on it. Do you see? That means so many. It's like the microcosm is giving tips to the macrocosm, and the macrocosm is giving tips to the microcosm. You see, the whole evolution of human psychology is towards self-actualization, isn't it? You see people of the likes of Maslow. Anybody who's listening, how many people know who Maslow is? In the chat section, let's have some audience engagement. Oh my god, guys. Forgive me, this thing was on mute, and Jesus, how long has it been? Has it been 10 minutes? Oh my god. I guess, the void had to hear that part of the time. The thing is, I feel if you understand silence, and sorry guys, I gotta apologize because I went into this incredible explanation of the Maslow's hierarchy and I think it was on mute. These are moments where a time machine would be useful. Get going, science. Anyways, I can re-explain, guys. Pretty much, I was getting into this idea that it's an evolution of self-actualization only to recognize that the journey made the destination meaningful. Okay? And so the journey up this hierarchy, and I'll tell you, you can say this is, you heard it from Mr.Within. Guys, I was looking at this and you know what I imagined in my inner realms? Imagine this triangle flipped around. You know what I mean? Imagine this triangle like from the edge of where the blue pyramid is, the top of the blue pyramid. Imagine the edge of another triangle, same triangle but upside down, an inverted triangle. So what I'm saying is our most individual success is happening in a community, so the success of the global community is really what we're living for. There's no greater legacy than open-mindedness. Because the world is changing all the time. So I am saying that at the edge, at the peak of Maslow's hierarchy, when you reach, and I think this is a cool way of me showing Maslow's hierarchy to you. Just hang in there, guys. Maslow's hierarchy is all starting from where? This guy's mind. You see this? This picture right now is so placed in a genius. Let me see if it shows on your side. There you go. There you go, guys. You see it? So, this guy, the spirit in the machine, is seeking self-actualization, but because of a strange amnesia, is finding itself in the physiological first. So what it means is as you go up this hierarchy, you're going to become more aware of the collective. Do you see? That means you can say Maslow's hierarchy was the peak evolution of the individual human motivation, human behavior, because behavior has motivations. Your ecosystem most of the time is defining your behavior, not you as a human being. Did you know that? I've seen people change when they go in rooms, in a different room. So anyways, see, I'm gonna bring the triangle down here so the robot can see it too, guys. The robot's like, get this out of my face. Anyways, I think this is good. So so this self-actualization, I've realized, is happening for a collective mind. And we as human beings have been considering that consciousness is only occupying the body. And I'm going to share with you one of my most interest. I was so fascinated by the theory. I'm going to share it with you. I was thinking about space, how in ancient times they saw space as if space is an element. The fifth element is not before it was a movie, it was ether, it was space. The concept space back in the day, So space was seen as an element. And when you study fluid dynamics, you're studying, in some sense, treating even air as a fluid. So for example, when you're trying to design, let's say, a tank, you're considering of the particles inside the tank, how they're influencing it, and how the gas would influence it, or if it's more kind of fluid, liquid. So I'm telling you this, that it's so space, if considered, look at my kind of staircase of thinking. Space is being considered an element. Imagine if space is an element, and if space is an element, let's say space is a fluid, okay? Now, if space is a fluid, it means it's not empty. So let's say space is not empty. If space is not empty, just like how fish in an ocean, there are currents in the ocean that influence the fish, there are currents in space, intelligent currents in space that influence conscious human expression and creativity. So just like a fish underwater suddenly is hit by a current of water and suddenly it's like, how am I flying this? How am I in some sense swimming this fast? It's the current. So when a rock star is on stage in the zone, when that artist is in the zone, or any human being realizes that the evolution of linear creativity is into an ability to handle the nonlinear. After knowledge saw itself in the mirror, it marched into the unknown. That's the proper vision. That should be the proper vision of the educational system. So I'm saying if there is a chance that space is an element and it's all around us, there can be intelligent currents. Consciousness can be a current, or it can be an engagement of a unique factor with a current. So I was feeling, wow, you're telling me solar flares are hitting the planet? If we say that observable universe is in a sensory perception, like in a range of sensory perception, that means we don't see like dogs do, like dogs see black and white evidently, Snakes see in infrared. If snakes were personified, they'd probably be like that commando with the infrared goggles. So what that means is there is so many waves hitting the earth that we don't have technology to even recognize. And I'm saying there's a huge potential that space is intelligent, and if we constantly ascribe our intelligence to matter, we'll never realize that the unknown is technically everything moving nothing into a new phenomena. So everything is going through the portal of nothing as a singular phenomenon. You see, there is no end to knowledge. Tell me, you see, even let's say there's a professor in a university. Why stop at the PhD? You can endlessly make endless credentials. You can make a mountain, and you can institutionalize a mountain where in some sense the person has to like get to a certain station and only authorized they can go higher in the mountain. Unfortunately, capitalism does bring a great freedom, but it's mountain-like. So those at the top are seeing the right view, and those at the bottom aren't. Do you know? And there's nothing wrong with that because nature designs mountain peaks. So there's nothing per se wrong with capitalism, but if one wonders if they can update capitalism like iTunes, how iTunes endlessly updates, what would it be? I feel the issue with human behavior and all government is that just look at the system. There's nothing wrong with the government. It's just the model of politics is that the political system can never be as up to date as its most up to date citizen. So the most up to date citizen of any political system has a commentary on how the system should improve. Do you know what I mean? So what that means is the psychology of the overall. That means this would be very complex. Perhaps in the future, laws are changing by the second. And every room you enter, it's like the laws have changed. The laws of the universe have changed. Imagine. So right now, we should be grateful that life is happening at a gentle level. This is why some beings are wise enough to put down anger like a weapon that was never necessary to hold. Trust me, what you use is immediately in your attention and defines your future. Unless you are aware that you're not the phenomena. And when you wonder you're not the phenomena, what are you? So I am saying, what is, you gotta, like, the whole picture of a school is even though, like, I can't push back history, but I'm telling you, there are things. There are everything, like they say, there were, like, I don't know, 14 technologies for methods of flight, but the airplane was one of them. Imagine all those other methods were perfected and evolved, but they were forgotten. And I feel it's not just technologies that are forgotten. Nature can be forgotten. And when it's forgotten, then your free will doesn't exist anymore. So think of it this way. The more the environment is not natural, the more life is going to be inside a program. So right now we're at a unique point where the human psychology is questioning it. And there's this huge problem because I don't know how it is, but the secular culture is just a reaction to the religious influence of history. So you know what that means? That means if you define yourself by the negation of the other, you're still not new. You're the new of the old. You know what I mean? I don't know how many people, I don't know how well I said that, but like that's the view. So you see, I feel we will realize on some level there is a simple human level of life required to be maintained, and I call this the sober state. What that means is it took us 4 billion years to just be a simple creature without any influence, but the societies we have built, it's insane, isn't it? You consume, for example, you go to a restaurant, you enter society, and you go, in some sense, consume food. But the moment you enter society, because you have to fit into that model, the society is technically consuming how comfortable your inner realms are to be in the world. So what that means is, like, either we have to advance the users of technology or we got to advance the technology. There isn't really that many options. When I see Elon Musk, I'm like, great, you're advancing the external technologies, but are the users ready? For example, are we as a species ready for all of us to get on, for example, hover cars in the future? Gasless hover cars. Can you imagine, like, your 80-year-old grandmother, how would her psychology be towards a hover car? Do you know? Where she's like, oh my god, I don't have to step, the car just comes down to the ground and I can get in it, or something. So I'm just telling you that our inner realms are not here to be limited to reality, or why else would they exist? Like, do you know what I mean? Reducing imagination, nullifying imagination to just materialistic reality means, like, why did you have it in the first place? Why do you have the ability to see parallel potentials before you make a decision? Do you know? So we gotta understand this world of ours is built on viewpoints. And every human being is a point of view. And based on their activity and action in the civilization, you can say they are a cell of the vision of their humanity, which is a collective being. So there will come a time, if you notice. So, yeah. So I'm kind of thinking about it, guys, that the world is too unknown than how we have defined it. We are still in a language worshipping model What that means is the child is not just spoon-fed baby food, it's spoon-fed the beliefs of its ancestors. You know, it's like, here's, sweetie, open your mouth. Here's your ancestors' belief systems. You know, and the kid doesn't want to eat it. I don't want to eat this belief system. You know, but the environment sculpts you, and there's nothing wrong with that. The way you handle your conditioning is not to fight it. You can't fight something that has happened. You can't unsee something you've seen. You can just reprocess it. Because every phenomenology appears as data, you know. You know what that means? That means let's say the fool, the joker, you know, found himself in front of the pearly gates, you know, and the gates were open and he was about to go inside, and then suddenly a voice comes like, "What are you doing?" You know, and the joker's like, "Hey man," you know, the fool, the archetype of the fool, you know, he's like, you know. The Joker is like, "Hey man, I was just going into heaven, you know. I've made many people laugh, I deserve to go in." You know, and the voice is like, "No, you've also made many people cry." And the Joker's there, you know. Sorry guys, I'm just animating a story. There was a point though to me animating this story. Let it come back to me. Let me see. Let me see if I can run faster than the train of thought I've missed. The Joker is this archetype of the Joker is about to go into heaven. God's voice comes and says, "What are you doing? You know, you can't go inside." And in that moment, the Joker looks at him, looks at God, and says, "You gotta be kidding, man. You know, don't joke, don't mess with me, don't joke around, God. You know, I know you're messing around, you know." And in that moment, God looks at the Joker and says, "Yeah, man, I'm joking. Come to heaven." You know, and that's the thing. You know, the archetype of the Joker. That's why fools get into heaven. You know, but unfortunately, they don't see it. They're too foolish to realize they're in heaven. You know, no, I'm joking. Anyways, guys, I'm just saying, on some level, you live through so many senses of self where you're like, okay, there's no way the mask of tomorrow is gonna be my face, you know. And you know, it's very important because this self-actualization. That's my whole point of sharing it. Is that it's not an individual named self. That's already been actualized. When you get to the steam part, you've lived your life. You've done everything you as an individual can do. Then your mind opens up to the collective. And I'm telling you guys, Civilization 2.0, which is hopefully going to be my banner. Pretty much, I'm going to spend the rest of my life. I've just decided this idea is the most important idea. You know, Civilization 2.0, it's like that idea. Technically, it's a tattoo, you know, on my mind, you know, like that idea's never gone away, you know. Life is a potential. It's like poker. You know, I was shocked. You know, there was a time I was studying business, then my mindset changed, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? What's the point of studying business where it's the hands that you're dealt? I'm not saying there isn't any issue. I've studied a lot of business. My father, you know, has a, believe it or not, like a PhD in business organization. You know, so I've been around business ideology a while. You know, but for me, what I understood from the business realm was an experiential component that you gotta literally journey to get something in this life. You can't just sit and get it. There has to be a strange energetic exchange of activity with the world in order for something to happen in the world. Now, what I've noticed is that the human being is not just living in buildings. We're living in ideologies. And if we have an ability to find ourselves in an attributeless aerial view as our whole moment, then we realize that we are actually preparing a civilization that is going to accelerate the speed of skill. And when the technological revolution, which I feel is going to happen and many people have spoken about it, the singularity, Ray Kurzweil, check out his work, guys. He's someone definitely to listen to his interviews. It's an evolution into a collective rhythm. We're pretty much getting bored from selfish cruelty. It's boring. For how long can animals bite each other? How long? Even in the concrete jungle, for how long can psychologies bite each other through cruelty? How long? It gets boring. After like 1,000 years of that, you'll be like, okay, we saw that. What's next? So inevitably, I feel the humanity right now is in a training. Is in the punching bag phase. You know, where it's like intense events are happening and energy is being extremely used. Right now, I would say that our civilization has the consciousness of an 8-year-old child. Civilization 1.0 is like 8 years old. Civilization 2.0 would be an attempt to, in some sense, make our civilization at least 18. So it's a suggestion. Let me tell you why I'm saying 8. Because the child psychology is when something goes away, people get mad. When you look at this whole political correctness thing happening in Western media, it's ridiculous because it's literally like you've given the child a toy. When you take the toy away, when some narrative that comes out of context of some sort of standard of moral etiquette, it becomes like suddenly vicious. So what is very fascinating is that sometimes who was this? Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche has this quote I'm going to tell you. He says, in fighting a monster, make sure you don't become one. In fighting monsters. And you know how many rebellions have happened in history, but you think the aftermath was better? No, the rebels were like, yo, it feels good being rich. And then they stopped being rebels, so they became tyrants. You can go from a freedom fighter to a tyrant in a microsecond if you don't know why you're there, why you exist in that moment. Here, this is the quote. He says, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. You know what's very true about Friedrich Nietzsche? It is the result of yoga. Yoga and meditation is staring into that abyss until you realize when he says the abyss will gaze back into you, you are that abyss in yoga. So first you feel you are known, you feel your mind is unknown or whatever is unknown, and then it changes place. You feel like the unknown mover of the known. When you feel like the unknown mover of the known, you don't fear the known anymore. You realize it's there for the unknown. So right now, the conscious mind is making itself the center of its universe, so we only have access to the sensory embodied dimension or plane of existence. But do you know that it's as if suddenly the conscious mind realizing it's the unconscious mind? The unconscious mind is the center of the universe. What that means is imagine suddenly, in way in the future, 10,000 years in the future, we come and say somehow through some ridiculous next level technology, we found the center of the universe and humanity and all the beings, let's say even it's a galactic kind of uh, gathering or something, let's say, and so everybody's clapping, and then we're like, but bad news. We're like, what? Bad news, we can't see it, it's too dark. It may be just a giant black hole in the center of the universe. It's just too dark to see what you're going to do. We don't have candles that can illuminate that far, you know. I think all of life comes down to the study of how energy is being. And if you realize you are being before you do anything, that's being aware of your presence before the personality comes into projection. So what I do is before these talks, in order to kind of like, I mean, it comes second nature now, but it's like I would just be silent and the inner realms would start moving and then I would speak. There was a time where I would move before my imagination, so I felt I didn't have an imagination because I was so uh, impulsively, kind of like an animal instinct, like reacting to things. So that means this is the value of patience. You let your mind to get a look at the moment too. Hopefully this isn't on mute. Okay, it's not. All right. You see, it's hilarious, isn't it? We are given. It's like this. It's our free art. The human free will and metaphor. The human mind is the perfect metaphor for freedom of speech. You're given freedom, but there's already preconditions to how the world was moving before your eyes. We are literally opening our eyes on the shoulder of a giant. And so that's our inner realm. Our inner realm is in the mystery of the unknown vastness of all phenomenology. So you know what's cool? You know what's cool? Imagine there was like imagine like that show The Jetsons or something, that I saw this when I was like super young. There was this thing where they had this hover thing with a jetpack like thing in the bottom of it. The person would go stand on it and this glass containment around the person would appear. And so it's like they're standing on a board and then around the board suddenly glass appears. And so that means they're not going to get choked out by the air. Inside the glass, nothing's happening. And the thing would just fly into the air like this flying capsule. And the person was in it. And it was something where, I don't know how to say it, but it's like there is an observer that is untouched, and there's an experience that has so many turbulent moments in it, and you have to pilot in it consciously or it gets turbulent. That means you got to pilot yourself even in the context of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But the self-actualization now, Mr. Within is saying, the way I feel the result of that equation is that it's that your inner realms now should be shared. And so many people are shy. So many people think social media is the degradation of language. In some lens, yeah. In some viewpoints, yeah. But it is also the evolution of self-expression. That means it's a virtual relationship. That means I consider these talks to, believe it or not, be like Mr. Within. For me, I was like, wow, how would my like grandkids see this? And I was like thinking like, they're gonna see it like, wow, it's like a digital avatar. So I think I could be one of the first early birds that in some sense is trying to somehow create a digital avatar. What that means is the difference between an avatar and a human, you can say, is that the avatar is multidimensionally acknowledging its existence. So it's not bound by definition. But the human being has to be bound by definition, or who would we be? Do you see? So we're kind of like, imagine we didn't just pick up food and stuff, fruits or something to just eat. We picked up that fruit and mixed it with some stuff and made paint. And we painted ourselves. Now I'm saying, imagine every human being you see, their personality is literally how, based on their experiences so far, they have painted on their face a conceptual mode of their self. Not realizing that every day you wake up from that pitch blank, um, from that blankness of deep sleep, we awaken to the day. All right, it's like a swimmer's head being underwater, coming out of water, going underwater, coming out of water. You know. So we're creatures by nature oscillating between different states of being. So you can't, so what that means is no human being can judge another human being because the sophistication of the mind is that it's changing. So how can you judge a growing process? You judge anyone who still has a chance and they'll be like, hey man, I got a chance. I don't need your judgment. Do you know? So there is something about right now human beings needing to discriminate between what is purely objective phenomena and what is the subjective evocation of the meaning. Do you know, right now that you're listening to me, imagine I'm like a creature just singing. So you're hearing some creature make a melody, sing a song, okay? Or in ancient times they called it satsang or something, you know? Or when you sing songs on Saturday, you can call that satsang. but they had Sunday prayer in the East, they had satsangs in the West, Okay. What I'm saying is that what can evolve? Either physically our bodies evolve, or our vision evolves. And our vision evolves through communication. So the more communication happening on Earth, the more, if there is even any sort of extraterrestrial species, they would look at us and be like, okay, at least this species is doing intelligent activity. It hasn't created machinery that's just doing all the intelligent activity for it. Because then we would become a biological statue that over time will be programmed by our program. It's like, imagine setting something into motion, but that ends up like, that was the fear of the Hadron Collider. They're like, okay guys, maybe like we should just have some fire extinguishers close by in case a black hole appears. In case something goes wrong and a black hole starts consuming this visible world of ours due to a mis-experiment. Just have some firefighters nearby so they can run into the black hole first and we can see what happens. Like, really, seriously, you can't do anything when a black hole is consuming the physical realm, really. Firefighters at that point would just throw an axe and then be like, all right, I'm finally going home to my kids. I'm joking, guys, of course. This is the playful portion of the talk. Anyways, I don't know. Creatures of attention, every human being has access to a different cultural program. Just like how a phone has multiple apps open, the human being has multiple directions, pretty much different states of mind, generate states of self, and if that self desires, it attaches that image to itself. You know what that means? That means it's like in your childhood being weak, and then you become really strong, but then you remember your childhood and you think you're weak, but then you remember, no, you're really strong, and then you realize why the association with that thought. That means the advanced communicator knows when to say goodbye to a certain thought. That means you choose. Do you think most people think thoughts just, even though it is true, Sadhguru says the content of your mind is not your choice. That means if somebody comes and shouts, apple, it's like, okay, an image of an apple might pop in your head. You don't have control over that content of your mind, but you have control with where your attention goes next. So technically you have control over everything that influences you because you can choose where to look at. Isn't it? So you can say freedom of speech is freedom of movement, but in the subjective realm. And self-actualization is a strange way where society and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is based where individuals, isn't it hilarious? It's like It's kind of like Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead and man killed him. So man doesn't think about God, but subconsciously his technologies are trying to make him a god. Where in the future we have again a suggestion of an attempt towards games that in some sense are indistinguishable from reality. That means the person to look like I remember that when I was young and I would play like stay up some nights play like that was PS1 at that point, you know. Technically my childhood was the beginning of the museum of gaming consoles, you know. So that means to the cyberspace culture, I'm probably like the spirit of the old world, you know. But anyways, a point where technology becomes us, it's kind of interesting. Either the spirit is in the machine or the machine is in the spirit. I feel the machine is in the spirit because before we even had the word machine, there was something there. You know? So you can say the spirit is an unknown movement, the machine is a known movement. When you study, for example, mechanical engineering, you're pretty much looking at all the machinery, all the phenomenology in your environment, and wondering through a certain scope and lens of a recognition of certain potential laws. You're kind of wondering about how things move and happen. So what that means is, here's the cool thing. Complexity in life can be intimidating. But when you confront that fear or whatever, the complexity simplifies. Anything your conscious attention goes on, it simplifies. That means because you keep looking through it, you're seeing more of it, so you automatically understand more. So when you tell me who feels more comfortable in a building, a guest, a random person who just enters the building, or the architect who made the building, who feels more comfortable in the building? You know, the architect. And we're realizing our attention is leading towards the area where sensory perception is extracted from to be subjective architecture, to be how you can say, subjectify ourselves. That means at some point of this evolutionary process, which I totally, give a high five to Darwin, incredible work. But at some point, this creature was like, all right, I'm not just an object, I'm a human being. The creature put a tie and a suit on and went in a metal capsule and went to work at a fast speed with like 24 stops in the middle. Subways are dangerous, guys, I'm telling you. The subway it's not built for a human being. It's built for jello. I'm telling you guys, underneath every word you know, your attention is the life of the party. And the party is the sensory realm. Your attention is you. And with meditation, yoga, all this is attempting to just make the person realize you're not just the stuff in your attention, you're the whole moment. Is your mind not being your whole moment right now as a being? Right now, if you were wondering about the edges of your moment, you would see it is the edge of your attention. So I am noticing we're all like unknown, raw presence of attention prior to any activity. That means before you do something, intelligence was being truth. That's why they called it self-realization. That it's not about just learning new things, it's about looking at the old things and seeing deeper dimensions to them. That's why it's something there, you just notice it as a new member to this system. Alright guys, I need a quick breather. So So, guys, Jake in the chat section has shared an interesting quote from the what seems to be the New Heart Sutra. Form is none other than emptiness. Emptiness none other than form. Yeah, they're two sides of the same coin. I'm telling you. You can't fear emptiness without fearing form. You can't love emptiness without loving form. You see, that means at some point I feel we tap into the unknown, into an unknown atmosphere, just like that astronaut taking the first step on the moon. That's an unknown space. Now, guess what? There are unknown spaces beyond your eyes, and we don't know a lot about it. And there can be retaliation. And pretty much what happens is that when an important activity happens, an important event happens, like a renaissance, human beings, they go through the mob mentality until a certain threshold, then they jump into the great mentality. So you get resistance until at some point that resistance just doesn't exist anymore. So believe it or not, judgment has a lifespan. And so what that means is the context behind the value of our life, it can change. And that's why comedians, you see that, because I've wondered about stand-up comedy. When you look at stand-up comedy on YouTube, for a hobby, I do that sometimes. And you see these stand-up comedians, they're just a person going on stage, sharing a story, and there is a struggle between being real to who they are and trying to just give the crowd their meat, the savage meat that the crowd wants to eat. There's a difference. For example, when you see Bill Hicks or George Carlin, these comedians, they were like, I'm telling you jokes, but look at what I see. But a lot of comedians nowadays, they're just, it's like, it's good to be silly, but about the macrocosm, not there needs to be some sort of ability for the communicator in any state on this earth to be able to observe phenomena before the decision. Observe before you decide, and it will change your life. And that observance means just sitting still, just watching. When people watch TV, they are like in the most meditative state. I'm like, people think TV, I mean, of course, for young children, I can understand how TV brainwashes them. But for someone, especially for someone, let's say you've studied film and you are aware of what goes on behind the scenes, you kind of don't freak out anymore. That means it's like, I'm telling you, when a writer reads his own book, and when someone else reads that book, there is a mysterious awe where the writer will never know how the reader read the book, and the reader will never know how the writer wrote the book. There's always, I don't know how to say, like life is just vast spectrums of dualistic simulations. Right now, me remembering my childhood, I'm considering that as a simulation. And I think it's a very interesting idea that what is time is a glove. And that's what Plato meant when he said time is the moving image of eternity. That time is being moved by that which is beyond time's conception. That means after some point, like it's like the person suddenly, took off his watch. And the person and his friend was like, why'd you take off your watch, man, out of nowhere? Like, it's just randomly. And then the guy's like, because the gods, the person's like, because when I asked the gods, what time is it? They all laughed. So that means time could be a local machine. And the spirit could be a non-local field. So that's my thing, that I feel human psychology if we want to keep the animate potential of the presence of the intelligence of the whole universal sector alive, that means it's like right now we're comfortable to seeing life in like animals. Some people are super compassionate, they see life in plants, you know. Even insects are, of course, before plants, you know. And you see this. You see the scale of like Janus. A Janus would be like this, you know, where they're kind of going to this level. But then, you know, after some point, you'd kind of see if you were compassionate to the universe, that means here's the thing. On some level, belief systems make it impossible to do something new or to see something new. So human beings have to be aware. Language is a box on a person's head. If somebody comes up to you and says these words are just me and this sentence is the only truth, they have not realized what Alfred Whitehead said was how life is a process. It's an unknown process, and the knowledge of our civilization is being navigated. The plane of our intelligence is being navigated by pilots. You're a pilot right now. You're a human being and part of humanity. What are you going to do in this life? You know? Don't be afraid to have your greatest self shout at you or scold you in the mirror. The greatest vision of yourself. You know, there was one day I was sitting at the porch, and I'm like, all right, let's try this thought experiment. You know, why not? Einstein saw himself move at the speed of light. Let me see what I can do with the thought experiment. You know? And I remember I was sitting on my porch, you know, I had this kind of semi like half filled cup of tea, you know. That's the cool thing about giving a talk that goes more than an hour and having a hot cup of tea at the end of it. You're drinking iced tea. I sat when I was at the porch, I just wondered, all right, let's see, you know, let's entertain my cellular planes for a moment, and let me try to visualize what the worst version of me is. So I tried to imagine the most inefficient version of myself, the worst version, you know? And right then, the moment I saw the worst version of myself, I could instantly see how the opposite of that would be my greatest. This is why mistakes are like instruction booklets on success. There's something about life where it's a balance between space and the movement of form in that space. And you can totally see human beings that are comfortable with silence and stillness because they become untouched as a thought. You know what that means? That means you as a being hear sound. That sound enters your ear, projects some meaning, but you notice you are the observer of all that. You are the observer of your inner realms. That means you are even beyond your inner realms. That's why I said created the term the language threshold. Because after some point, from this linear A, B, C, D kind of civilization, A, B, C, D, E evolution, you know? A, B, C, D evolution. You see, there's a silliness to linearity. Like rationality needs the data first. So explorers, rationality should bow to the explorer. Because what it is we're pretty much painting a picture of humanity and accepting it. Because if the planet is in the middle of nowhere, guess where our thoughts are? Yeah. So that's that, guys. That the non-local spirit is the knower as a field of activity or as Rene Descartes would say, the mind in its own room, in its own dimension. Your imagination is something where once you realize how cool it is, it's like learning to whistle, you know. That means I remember my father would whistle and I couldn't whistle. And he would use a method where he would teach me and I couldn't use his method. You know, whatever I tried, I couldn't use his method of whistling. And then one day I was just walking in the lobby of my apartment in Iran when I was a kid, and it was like suddenly I heard it. It was like like opera, you know, like suddenly the sound appeared, the control of the sound appeared, you know. And then I had this thing where I don't know, guys, I would get taunted by challenges that appeared simple to me in my youth. You know, that means when I lost in chess, I would remember when my youth, I would take the chessboard. I was like this little kid. I would take the chessboard to the random guests in the party. I'm like, okay, random people are here. Let's go play chess. You know, with these random strangers. And when it's chess in like a big gathering where everybody's just sitting, you know, not doing much, there would definitely be people I would play chess. You know, as a kid, like I was like maybe like 9. No, not 9. Maybe like 10. And I remember every person I played chess with revealed to me a version of how chess could be played. And that's the truth of skill. It's exposure to the right stuff, to nature. Every human being has their own nature. That means it's as if when a person tries to be something else other than themselves, they're dishonoring their DNA. They're dishonoring their ancestors. Anytime you as a human being feel it makes more sense to play games with the subjective realms, because I approach it as a designer. The moment I see what I see from it, I move on. Because I know the nature of the mind is not just this activity. It's the awareness to the self that's being the intelligence before we do anything. That awareness is non-dual. That means we can't speak of it because it's too moving. It's like trying to catch a. It's like somebody gets an empty cup, and they've held it with the handle, and they fill the cup up with the water of a river, and they're like, "Hey guys, I got the whole river in the cup." No, it's too dynamic to be captured. It's too dynamic to be painted. And human beings, we're not that advanced for now. What that means is our intellectual capability is, in some sense, it's maybe processing 3 parallel dimensions at the same time easily. I would say people, before they make a decision, can very easily see 3 dimensions of the potential of their action before it happens. Easily. Easily. A person can see more, a person can see less, a person can choose to even literally turn off the light of the room of their inner realms. They could choose, their attention could just go more focused on the objective simulation rather than the subjective simulation. You know, life, the good thing is that we're not all here to be clones. And strangely, our morality is collective agreement, but we're still not here to be clones. That means anytime you see civilization becoming like a clone, that's when, you know what the issue of that is? I can say a lot of young children who idolize celebrities, I mean, on some level, I could see it as part of the natural process of like, all right, they've been drawn to talent. But on another level, It's the sacrifice of who you will be for who you want to be. So you shouldn't sacrifice you see, having desires on external phenomena is okay. Having desires on self usually leads to karmic turbulence too much. That means it's like a seed that wants to see the fruits right away. And the sun is like, yo, relax, seed in the soil. You gotta like grow for some time, and hopefully you get enough water. I feel like, just like how there is no such thing as night if we were living really close to the sun doesn't experience night. The star is burning bright endlessly. That means there's a presence. Light, it has an intelligent, spacious presence. And what's happening, the light is hitting a form, and that form, that biological being through the light, is being the simulation of consciousness. Light is the next step for neurologists. They have to stop studying the brain, they got to study, or the eye. Let me tell you like that, neurology of sight is the most important, the best thing scientists can do for the sake of their context enduring in the future. Because you know what it would mean? Because we think we're objects, we can comment on our minds. But if we were minds, we would realize we can't comment on the objects. So imagine you call an atom, excuse my language, but let's say you call an atom a piece of shit, like a rude term, You're like, these atoms. You're calling molecules like garbage. Which technically is true. Garbage is molecules, but but I'm telling you, it's like you would see the personality kept in human consciousness does not relate. It doesn't echo into that microcosmic perception. So what does that mean? That means our attention is like the conductor stick of that conductor, and the symphony are all the sounds being played, or all the various things being received from sensory perception. Your attention is piloting your inner realms, which influence how you're living in your outer realms. And overall, you're an attributeless field observing how all the content in your vision is moving. That's how far I've come so far in 2020 in wondering about this phenomena of human life. Because even Maslow would know, what is human being motivated? By the next object of his desire. Or which the next, you can say the coolest object was a subject. So after you've played with, like, for example, an object, you'd be like, all right, what's another cooler thing to play with? You see the world is made up of subjects. You begin for the first time wondering about the linguistic simulation and how you're even being raised as I'm speaking. How the way so many parents in the world are speaking to their children is setting up the child's value. Because when you see, trust is very important. But it is not as influential as just where the vision is. So you got to realize it like this. You're a mortal being. We're all like candles, Really, can we say we are stressed? Like, do we not see life as temporary physically? So we have a physical opportunity. Every day I'm drawn to these talks because I'm like, all right, I got, like, I don't know, whatever amount of time I got here. Like, I have this much time to see what an answer to the question would be. And in my attempt to go find the answer, I realized the revolution, like the question needs to be revolutionized. That means there's this old saying. They say if they make you ask the wrong question, they don't have to worry about your answers. Pretty much in business, if there's a competitor that has, let's say, information about what's going to happen in the market, as a comparative advantage. Okay? So this business looks at other businesses and knows what's coming. That business will have access to stability long term. Now imagine how many decisions on the planet are being made where it's as if like people, the business is like a car being driven, and the CEO or the one running it, you can say, is like the owner of the business, is like the driver of the business. He's choosing where this vehicle is going to be driven. Now imagine this driver stops seeing literally like a plastic bag where a newspaper comes in the front view mirror, and the person can't see what's happening in the future. That business dies. So what that means is our minds should be high speed, but the conducting of the effort of civilization through tolerance and charity should be a bit more lower speed. Right now, I feel the task of the human being is just we input so much new language from the inner realms that automatically there will be a new awareness to what the sophisticated ability that the human being has to use language, how that is in some sense uh, what is the greater uh, substratum, or what's happening behind the curtain of the sensory. For now, our attempt is to storify the hell out of it. You know, that means hell is a story. You know, but it's a story with a potential. That means in Zen, the hell wasn't an external location, you know, it was a state of mind. You felt bad, you were in a bad place. You felt good. Oh my God, did you get a peek in heaven? So you see, it was the state of mind which inevitably brought the person to a free will that is accepting what phenomenon attention is on. Studying yourself is like studying the engine of the most advanced car you can find, or most advanced airplane. Because, guys, a civilization with interstellar dreams, uh, aerospace engineering is going to suddenly become huge. That means when we realize three-dimensional space is the solution to two-dimensional plane overpopulation, that's when anything to do with the air, like, you know what it is? It's like we're fish at the bottom of an ocean. Instead of the ocean water, it's air, and we're just flying by the coral. We're not using all the space that's there. And it is true that when you go up that space, you find greater currents. And there is a river-like pattern of phenomena changing, echoed in many dimensions. So that means what we can at least tell, that if we ever come into contact with an extraterrestrial, we are looking at the extraterrestrial in a changing world. So what that means is that we're not going to be talking to statue extraterrestrials that are just statues, they don't move, you know. It's, imagine the extraterrestrial contact is with a creature that moves in space and time, and the moment you move in space and time, the atomic existence of the extraterrestrial means atoms have to change. So it's kind of like an extraterrestrial living on Earth, and then realizing the elements and minerals and the way Earth is built, its body is not designed for Earth. And so the more the extraterrestrial lives like a human being, the more it dies to who it was in where it came from. So you see, eventually we will have to give space for dimensions to evolve until in the future they can find their collectivity. That means that there are some ships that are already set sail, they're in the water, and there are some ships being built on shore before they go into the water. And what that means is the future generations are pretty much going to be the captains of these ships. And I'm telling you, the study of sight is global and universal. That means if the creature sees us, that means it has sight. That means it has consciousness. That means the creature, in its most metaphysical, the extraterrestrial, in its most metaphysical speculation, realized it's not just purely matter. So it could be that potentially our minds are present with and among the other, but our bodies can't process that presence because language is being choked out by materiality. Pretty much when I look at the dictionary, I just see words like statues. I see statues. It's like a graveyard of experiences, which now are what's only remained from them is just a word and its derivation and its usage and its various multidimensional definitions. Even guys, like, what is more multidimensional than the dictionary? There's such levels of multidimensionality. Just think of language for a second. The letters make up the word. The word with spaces between other words make up the sentence. The sentence makes up the paragraph, and so on. That's one way of seeing. Let's say that's the vertical dimension. The horizontal dimension would, in some sense, being able to see that the person can, for example, how can I tell you? It's like in one variation, the senses of self change. In one variation, the senses of the world change. That means when the world changes before you do, you feel you're being pulled. When you change before the world, you feel you're pushing. So you know what I mean? There's a different energetic relationship there. Okay, so guys, my attention came out of the chat section. So guys, School of Athens 2.0 is, I've pretty much decided to dedicate all my efforts, digital social media efforts, in this community, and I'm going to be sharing my work in this community of Patreon community that's a safe space, you know, because I've experienced, like, how can I tell you, Patreon is like, it's like a bunker. It's like a it's like a safe community where it's pretty much my podium to the digital community when I'm kind of sharing my work and updates on what I'm doing, and also what you get from it is like a lot of videos I post. But anyways, guys, it's just it's something that I've just created to gather around a community for the things that I may do in the future. So it's pretty much like it's a boat I've made. It's a ship I've made. If you want, you can jump in and you'll sail alongside like my lifetime. If not, then it's the talks are all accessible. These talks are being shared with everyone. So yeah. So TKO, I hope that answered your question. Um, Guys, I mean, I can give you some updates here, but I'm pretty much focusing my attention on two books and this massive process of moving everything from these, like, not moving, but also uploading the talks on Spotify. So in the future, pretty much I'm putting my talks on Spotify, but because there's a monthly time, it's probably going to take years for all of them to be uploaded, you know. But so these are, for now, these are like side priorities. But yeah, if anybody has a question, I feel like I've kind of reached the epitome of this talk. Oh, here. Egos in the linguistic simulation. What is the ego? Alan Watts had said it so very simply. that it's like the attention to what you think you are in that moment. The thought of your isness or your being or your presence or your essence or your Atman, you know? I'm telling you guys, this world, we've passed the phase of too much external rebellion because we've grounded ourselves as minds. So back in the day, they would say, what does the sage do before enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. What does the sage do after enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. Now, it's kind of like, what does the sage do before enlightenment? Build an advanced civilization. What does a, what does a sage do after, enlightenment? Build an advanced civilization. You see, the external realm can't be given too much value because how your attention moves into the moment is kind of steering it. That means the personality of this robot, this guy sitting on, is the guy. The robot, unless there's an AI program in there, probably doesn't have its own personality. The guy is too relaxed. Definitely, there's AI in this robot. That means the guy's barely doing anything. The guy's just sitting in the robot. The advanced AI is fighting, probably. Yeah, this guy seems too relaxed. He's like, all right, just they need someone to be here. So guys, this triangle, for anyone who's just recently joined, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. Check it out. Like, honestly, evolution is so remarkable, guys. Back in the day, people had to imagine some important event happened. The guy had to get on a horse, literally ride for days, hoping he somehow makes it, and go give a message. Go share a story. The guy would have to, back in the day, storytellers had to journey for days just to get to another town, to hear new stories, to share stories. Nowadays, look at the reverse. The ears find the voice. Back in the day, the voice found the ears. You had to go towards truth. Nowadays, truth is coming to us. All the newest services, all the most efficient technology is coming to you. You don't have to move. Don't budge. Pretty much be a biological statue as AI builds your civilization for you. You know? So, that's the thing, guys. That's the thing. So, welcome to the chat, everybody. You know, dude, I feel like in the movie Matrix, when Morpheus saw Neo become Neo, he was like, I knew it. You know? It's like Morpheus was like, bro, I read the script before you. I know you're the chosen one. Neo's like, I don't know, Morpheus. I doubt myself, you know? Why is there a white rabbit, you know? And Morpheus is like, Neo, trust me, man. I've talked to the directors. I've read the script. We all know you're the chosen one, Morpheus breaks the fourth wall, or Morpheus was actually the only character in Matrix who got a glimpse of the fourth wall. That's why he knew Neo was the chosen one. This is for all those Matrix fans out there, you know. That's Mr.Within's theory on how Morpheus knew Neo was the chosen one. He broke the fourth wall. He could see the directors filming it. That's so ridiculous. Anyways, guys, for now, I hope anybody who's listening to me, if you're a busy person, let's say, go buy a small notebook. Small notebook. You know, if the notebook doesn't, of course, buy the notebook first, then check to see if the notebook fits in your pocket. You know, and then in this notebook, always for me, guys, like I have this habit often where I put a pen. I always have a pen on me. I'm like back in the day, our ancestors had swords. Nowadays, of course, the man has a pen. You know. And civility has become the sword. Law has become the sword, which is incredible on some level. But everything has dark side, of course. You can't see anything without a shadow. If there's light, there's probably a shadow. Yeah. So, yeah, the evolution of vision. That small notebook in your pocket, let me tell you, sometimes the greatest thoughts come in moments where we don't have pen and paper. Do you know how many moments I have, like, I had this, like, ingenious thought. And in that moment, I was like, I had the pen, but I didn't have paper. And I was like, okay, there's a tissue box here. I had to write the thought. The thought was so important to maintain that I wrote it on like some box or something, some tissue box or something that was there, you know? And I'm telling you, have that relationship in life that when your mind enters a state of observance, language is an extrapolation of that, is a translation, is an intelligent, it's like you're bringing down to earth how your imagination was beyond the clouds, you know? So guys, unless people have any like Q&A or something, I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, really, I went across the mind-body dualism. I went across the point that, you know, non-local means unknown. Unknown intelligence is moving in known biomachinery, you know. And the ego is, in some sense, existence in the linguistic simulation. You know what that means? That means the same way this guy sitting on this robot's head is the spirit inside the machine, the same way this guy's idea on himself is the spirit that is in the machine of the brain. Now that spirit, I'm saying, I thought it was form, but it's moved. The form is moving. I thought the form was moving. If there are certain states of mind, yes, they're totally yourself. It's just self-origination. But there's some states of mind that there literally something has moved before you have. And in a strange way, reality is given imagination. That means that I was like, okay, is my imagination based on my reality, or is my reality based on my imagination? And I noticed we need space before we can move in the space. So I have this feeling that we are living abstract inner lives before any physical activity. And another way I can kind of give in my vision, this is like good proof, good attempt at a proof for this, that check it out. I had a dream, guys, dream. In this dream, I moved my body. I wanted to go left, I could go left, I could go run, and I was running at a fast speed. So I had conscious ability to move. I woke up suddenly from that dream. When I woke up, and something cool about the dream to tell you, in the dream, I ran underwater at a fast speed. So I was running really fast, and there was a part of the train in my dream that was underwater, and I ran underwater, and I was just standing there, and nothing was happening. I was still breathing. you know? So I woke up from that dream in the most incredible existential shock of my lifetime. One of the great. It was like Thor's hammer had accidentally fallen into my head, but I was asleep in the bed. You know, I didn't even know at the time how important that event was. So I woke up and I'm like, wait a minute, are you telling me that when my body is asleep, my mind projected a body that could move and a world where it could move in? I was like, my mind is playing video games when I'm asleep? What is this? Right? And it was so fascinating. Then, for the first time, I stopped thinking that objectivity and subjectivity are in different rooms. They are actually present in the same room, but their distinction comes from that presence. Because the human being has two choices. Either your free will is your intelligence, or some other intelligence. When we look at the body is not like because I move my hand in a certain way, doesn't mean the earth is going to rotate the other way. You see, the body is the creation of the creator, which is the physical world. Now, when we look at the mind, mainstream is saying the mind and the idea you have is the creation of the physical world. But I'm saying the movement of the physical world is the creative act of the space. So that means stillness is moving stuff. That means space is moving matter. The closest term I've found in this world of ours to this is field. The best word you can use for this unknown field of current like rhythm, as it's like space, it's like the soul. Guess what? You want to go out of body, you go out of body, but you're like, wait a minute, space has become my body. How do I go out of my body of space? And you see that is when the pure unknown comes. And the pure unknown doesn't mean that the person is endlessly asking questions. After some point in life, you'll realize you are a certain energetic capability. That means you can just do certain things in your day. And then it's up to your inner realms to prioritize external value after some point. If you want to maintain, if you want to control anything, it's like your hand has to touch the dirt if you want to plant the seed. You have to look at the chaos if you want to see new order. You can't ignore the chaos because the new order should be a solution to this chaos, and even this chaos's potential. It was in that moment, imagine playfully, like Superman defeated a villain, or Batman defeated the Joker, and then he's like, wait a minute, what if the Joker had grandkids? And the grandkids of Batman are fighting the grandkids of Joker. You know what I mean? And this pattern, for eons, it just echoes, of suited ignorance fighting each other, but they're like the same soul after so many years of doing the same thing, It's like I'm playfully, of course, opening it up as if like I'm trying to include Buddhist listeners to perceive a reality where there's a transmigrating eternity in a temporal loop. We got that's a niche market, guys, It is a rare market, really. Things come and go. When we find contentment with nature, we find contentment with the natural movements of our inner realms. After we find contentment with nature, we realize our free will is the possibility to see something moving and then direct it. So I would say human beings have free will. It's like we don't control the speed the world goes, but we control the direction. In some sense, that means we control the direction of history, but how fast things change in a society in a certain time period has to do with how sophisticated its technologies are. And this is the worst. This is the ridiculous situation. That let's say robots in the future don't want to destroy us, then we'd be like, still, the world is too advanced for the people to use. So sometimes there's a problem of creating an invention before its time. Because there's no user for it, so it can fade. This is why I feel sometimes the infusion of ideas keeps it karmically links the value of the expression together. So you can say the more human beings that enter civilization, the more creatures are looking at the world and finding a value. So every human being, it's kind of like this. Either 8 billion beings are in one dimension, or one dimension is inside 8 billion beings. Or let's say there's 8 billion dimensions in one being, or there's one dimension for 8 billion beings. You see what I mean? And I feel it's that there is some sort of animative force where it's like, I thought about it, it's like, how could thinking be wrong? Most people, most the secular culture's kind of complaints about religious ideology is that why do you need an invisible security guard of your own thoughts? Self-censorship, or how the belief system denies validity of other viewpoints. It is true, we have to find some tree to, hold on to the branch. Every person, like right now, I'm speaking to you through the English language. This is like a certain program, cultural program, and its fruits. The fruits of the cultural program is the sophistication of how much the language can harbor the experiences of the human beings during that time. Language is the most important field of study. That means if you are a parent and if your child out of nowhere, authentically though, your child comes authentically out of nowhere and says, "Dad, I want to be a linguistic professor." Just slowly, slow hand clap and then wipe the tears of joy from your face. Because it means that your child has caught on to the common denominator technology, the bridge between the minds of man, language. That means before you go studying, looking for entities in other rooms, wonder how language is being experienced. Because sometimes people are following, like, a myth becomes a treasure map for an unauthentic desire-bound search. And that search doesn't go well. Because if at some point you don't listen to your presence, you will create self-resistance. Anytime you see, it's like this. Everything you have done in this life, think of it this way, that you have also done it in front of yourself. And if you were watching yourself in that moment as a bystander, you would suddenly have an opinion on your own self. Failure is like an ancient artifact that suddenly you put it in some wall of the pyramids of Egypt and a door opens. And that artifact, the moment it finds its value, you find the value in the design, then you suddenly get access. Because I've seen certain shamanic behavior. I personally have my own sort of behavior with my inner realms, and it tends to be very non-ideological. That means there's a way you can be where it's the doer, whatever you've done, realizing everything you've done is an energetic being. It's an expression of the energetic presence of what is just here. When you reverse engineer human ideology, you come down to the point where the ink fell from, one of those old school feather pens on the paper. When the ink fell on the paper, that was when the child psychology first felt it could see something more than its just being the world. So as if the child's born, the mind is not conditioned into individualhood, into individuality. So what it means is the mind of the child is being the environment, whole environment. Only when the parents speak to it, they suddenly shape the attention of a mind that is being the whole moment into identifying with the unique movement of its content. That means think about a Shaolin martial art master, and that Shaolin martial art master when that was like maybe like a few months old. Like that a child could barely open its hand or close it, and then you see the Shaolin monk after many years has become this sophisticated kind of like mover in physical reality. So we are evolving into our greater dimensions, strangely, because there's nowhere else for vision left to go, really. What do you do in emptiness? You let infinity roar. So anyways, guys, that's it for the talk. Before I end off, does anybody have a question, comment, anything about this, these ideas I've shared? I'm kind of curious, like, are people hearing these talks as just music, or are the concepts landing, you know? You know what, guys? I've been working on my science fiction recently. And I thought of an idea that I haven't kind of considered before, where it was like a time machine salesman. And the time machine salesman tries to sell the time machine, and his pitch goes wrong. The customer doesn't want to buy the time machine, then suddenly the future self of that salesman comes and takes the other guy and sells the product. And then the main guy comes back and says, "See, man, this time travel stuff is good. It works out." Guys, I'm glad the novelty of these talks are being felt, because that's the value of civilization. We're not here to do what our ancestors did. You can know that you doing what your ancestors did is the fastest way to disappoint their inconceivable spirits. Because I'm telling you, we don't live to if you're living just, let me tell you, there's two ways of living for others. There's a way of living for others where you haven't looked at yourself first, and then there's a way of living for others where you have looked at yourself first. This is a very important idea, guys. In my youth, I hadn't looked at myself, so my mind automatically gave value to others before giving value to myself. So my psychology strangely was kind of it was programmed in a way where it was like, I would self-limit myself. I felt my inner realms should not move out. That means some things I knew, I felt it should just remain. I didn't feel like communication was necessary. You know, many moments in life we're not the one moving it. That moment you get an Uber, you know, you can call it whatever. You can see the divine will in the Uber driver. You're like, if this Uber driver wasn't here, what would I do? Probably wait longer. So I don't know. There is something with vision. There is something with uh, creativity that is misunderstood or forgotten. I don't know which one it is. I think it's misunderstood. I think we're all actually have not been evolving in the wrong direction. We have been evolving in the right direction. Now, this doesn't mean the wrongs are right. It just means the wrongs are necessary for you to get a sense of what can be right. So it's a shift from this era where we want truth to be a portrait, instant snapshot. It's like, yo, man, if you can't give me a truth that I could hang on the wall, that's not truth. Well, that kind of truth was never truth. And that's what I'm saying. That the war of between belief systems, this leads to war any times the inner realms are not tolerant to co-create a new outer realm. Co-creation means that if you exist in a moment, you are meant to be the life of that moment because you're alive. You know what I mean? You're alive. There's something about being alive that's just, okay, it's just here. That's the potential. When you realize whatever complex activity you've ever witnessed, it's all on some level simple. Like you could see that martial artist do like that technique, that monkey technique, where the Shaolin martial artist in some sense takes the stick and runs on the stick and then jumps from the head of the stick in the air, slamming the stick on the opponent. And can you just imagine, like, back in the day, fighting a warrior with a spear, then you're like, did this guy just run up his weapon? You know? And so if you saw that complexity of movement, the master of that guy is seeing that and seeing it simple. The engineer understands the machine. But the person who's unfamiliar to the machine, oh my God, what is this? You know, is this our imagination's gone wild? Like, what is it? You know? But it's all that when we understand something, consciousness participates in the unknown. And that's the crucial point. That's the participation in life, because it's like, you know, it's like so many people out there in the world, they don't want to miss parties. They make sure they get there on time and all this. But how many people are missing the party of the actual experience of life? Because in Zen, I'm so happy I got introduced to Zen. Let me tell you why. They have this saying, they say, if you want to climb a mountain, start at the top. That means I realized, oh my God, in all my childhood, every moment I perceived weakness, inefficiency, inability, was all I could have used that same time to envision efficiency. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm saying that every time you look at failure, you're also realizing, all right, how long am I going to be looking at this thing? You know, the reason people succeed, because failure is boring. You know, victory means advancement. Advancement means the experience journey to a new plateau, to a new perception. Let me tell you guys the main thing that happened. And I feel this is going to happen on a massive level. I'm just a kind of early bird, maybe. You know? And maybe there were so many people that were early birds, but they just they couldn't find their voice to an audience. Maybe like YouTube wasn't there yet. So, you see, let us say whatever spark of an origin you want to give to your world story. The story seems to be a creature, an object, constantly becoming aware. It is not just one objective modality of being. So we can say consciousness can potentially be all of space because it's the change. So one thing we haven't, human beings maybe haven't thought about where consciousness could be hiding is in space, the whole space. That's why I'm saying it's a field. On some level, the brain is more like an antenna to me than me. The me is abstract. It's the reception and expression of every environment, every room you go into. It's like a mini ecosystem, isn't it? Everywhere you go, the environment has a certain constitution. Imagine how a robot would perceive a super advanced AI robot that's just geometrically tuned. That means, like, if a young kid asks how this robot in the future sees things, would be like, yeah, just sees everything as geometry. And what that means is this robot becomes the divine embodiment of geometric calculation. That's the advancement of the AI. I remember seeing a parallel to, so there's one version, you can say this is a symbiosis of a digital entity with a human entity. There was this Japanese show, I remember seeing it a while back. It was called Parasite, but spelled with a Y, I think. And it was this Japanese kind of animated show. But the concept behind the character development was so fascinating to just wonder about. And it was a bit kind of like, this isn't for the faint of heart, but it was a show where it was a sort of, it could have been extraterrestrial, unknown entity what became this guy's hand. So the dude's hand was pretty much like this alien entity that would defend him in this alien apocalypse. That was happening. This, kind of infection alien apocalypse. So there was something unique in the same way this guy is inside the robot. That was a sort of engagement with another form of pattern of thinking. And it was very fascinating because the parasite was like AI. You can say in the future somebody having a sophisticated AI in their hand would be similar to this Japanese show where it was instead some other, I don't know, different biologically patterned entity. So I'm saying we have to realize that we are not the same people our ancestors thought we would be. We are the now. If you notice, there's one letter separating the word now and new. Okay, so there's a now, and then with evolution, like the E in the word between the N and the W for the word new stands for evolution. The O between the word now shouldn't be an O, it should be the number 0. I feel people should write the word now as N0W. Because 0 is now, nowhere, now here. Do you see the similarity in the terms? That means location is projected in an unknown way. So if we identify with the projection, we still are aware that the unknown projector's there. So we can't play too much solid language games. And this was you can say this is one of Mr.Within's theory on the evolution of language. I kind of looked at it as if I was looking at designs, like a blueprint, right? And I was like, all right, let's say this common idea that pretty much everybody knows, that a substance can go through different states. That means when the temperature changes, the particles in the space begin moving, moving at different speeds. So we see that, for example, when you look at water, it's like you have ice. You have that cool glass of water you drink, and you have steam. And I thought that this is what's happening, where the I dash thought, is shifting in accordance to a solid state. That means the mind in an instant can totally be material and individual. Do you know? And in another way, the mind can also be liquid. That means, like, who are agnostics? They're like, I don't know, but maybe. I don't know, but maybe. Right? So the agnostic is in, like, the liquid state of mind. The materialist is in the solid state of mind. The yogi and the mystic are in the gas state of mind. You ask them who are you, and they'll be like, I'm everything being everything, bro. What do you want me to say? So that's what I'm saying. We are realizing, by realizing we're not language, we are observing it to then our attention moving it. Your attention is untouchable because it is not conceptual. The concept is in your attention. This is why in the Upanishads they said the seer of the seen is unseen. And when I say seen, I don't mean S-C-E-N-E. I mean S-E-E-N. That means the one who is seeing and the one who is aware of the one seeing is unspeakable, attributeless. So the closest word I found of kind of drawing this bridge between ancient metaphysical, you can say, the architecture of the image behind the language of ancient metaphysics to modernity. And if Terence McKenna said it's an archaic revival, check this out, guys. It fits in with what Terence said. Terence McKenna said there's an archaic revival. What does that mean? That means there's a pattern that's always been happening, and just those beings that are born anew are going to notice it, and they're going to be like, whoa, this happened for our ancestors. So really, there is no archaic world, there is no modern world, but there is this thing happening. This massive event of manifestation happening. Now, we are in such a unique evolutionary position because this massive event of manifestation that is occurring, on some level, it is inner. Right now, light is going inside my eyes. I am considering that I am like awareness, and then when I speak, I seem as a self. You know? You see what I'm saying there? That means before you speak, imagine everybody right now listening, we were all in a room and one of you spoke. Before you speak, we have no idea who you are. So the activity is the personalization, the movement. So the more still and silent you are, you're going to remember yourself as that field. The more movement and change, the more you identify with change, you're going to be the sort of, there's two ways, guys. I can say there's two ways of enlightenment which eventually are the same way. That means there's two exits out of duality. These are also entrances too. The void and also the infinite. The singular void and the infinite. That means, think about it. Right now, I'm just sitting in a room, dualistic context, human being, self in a world. That's duality. Okay? So there's a self in a world. This person sitting here. Now I can imagine if suddenly the self dies, oh no, emptiness. Or if suddenly all the cells, all the atoms, all the particles that are being us, imagine start vibrating at a speed unimaginable, where literally reality will become this blur of inconceivable form. So you can see there is infinite speed leading you towards the inconceivable beyond the dualistic clouds, and in some sense there is the void, the space behind the clouds. And they eventually become less painted by how it's like, you see, it's like a pilot. Where you lift off from, the moment you lift off from that airport, your attention is more on the airport you're going to, not the airport you came from. This is why, strangely, a lot of people who help others don't, helping is like free. You know? So, because it's free, it means it's optional. So sometimes to return free help is unnecessary. That's what I mean. You know? But it doesn't mean there's no value in helping. So yeah, guys, I don't know. That's the kind of metaphysical view in regards to science fiction. It's all about seeing what's happening now and realizing that whatever happens, if it happens and endures, there's going to be eyes that are going to be looking at it. And if there's a potential that time is a screen. Then the observer is the higher dimension. So your mind, the higher dimensions aren't for individuals. This is why I think the Buddha says there's this constant incarnation thing going on, reincarnation thing going on. You know why? Because beyond that, you're not a person. Oh, that means the edge of the personality is infinity. Imagine somebody looks at your personality, they're like, okay, man, you don't have more personality. You know? So you will suddenly see, all right, let's give this guy infinite personality. Then what? It just becomes inconceivable. So we see that we are judging our imperfections, but if we really attempted the perfection, we would be inconceivable. So the imperfection is better than the inconceivable perfection. Do you know? And what I mean by that, that means it's an explanation of existence before experience. Because it's very easy that to feel that because you're not just just you like pretty much what is growth? You're seeing yourself change as a person, right? So that means your eyes are changing, and even the cells in your body every 2 weeks or whatnot change. So everything is technically changing, but what is keeping that remembrance? So in other words, what is the common denominating witness of all subjective phenomena, including memory and imagination? And that is not an individual. And this is the hilarious thing, that the true depths of enlightenment is not for a person. It's for a presence. It's for those beings in this plane that it's like it's their time to live as their presence, not just as a personality. To get a sense of their own eyes after looking at the unknown anew. And that's the power of novelty. Pretty much new angles, you know. Okay. Sorry, guys. Just wanted to play with the geometry of it for a second. So, all right, guys. That's the end of the talk. Um, I'm not sure if I should open it up to Q&A or I was such a great speaker. You know, nobody has doubts in their mind. Oh, okay. I'm just telling you guys, that's cool. That means people have been drawn towards, okay, in life, I think it's a healthy thing to at least spend an hour a day trying to express your thoughts on paper. Do you know? Schools make writing boring, but really writing is like the last stance of consciousness in its attempt to use linguistic technology to polish and clarify its perception. You know, I really feel like when a person writes something, sometimes you will find your writing years later and it would be like a time travel machine of how you saw things. So honesty in activity uh, is memory. Honesty is memory. Honesty helps your memory, guys. I'm telling you, I think it's the dishonest that get forgetfulness. After a certain age, like the person shouldn't be dishonest, or I think it's too much subjective circulation. Not too much subjective circulation, but it's kind of like after some point, like the energy levels change. The energy I had in 2014 when I started giving these talks, I mean, now I still feel pretty energetic, but the energy had a different vibrance. You know, it was like a different intensity. And as the person runs laps around the sun, you in some sense get to, the sun has its toll on you. You know, age is like getting tan from time. Yeah. And guys, pretty much the School of Athens 2.0 thing, it's just like, it's my attempt at just setting up something. So if it, like, don't contribute it if you feel you can, you know? It's not like nothing enforced or something. All the books that I publish, like I'm eventually going to bring them all online, right? I just have a lot of paperwork to organize, pretty much like weeks of every day, just putting papers, you know? Sometimes when you gotta store things quickly, you just some writers might experience this where you have so many pages just infused with one another, because you just had to kind of like pile them and run towards something. But anyways, so thanks for tuning in, guys. And something interesting people may find in the School of Athens. So how can I tell you? The first sentence I wrote was, I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day, right? So it was this kind of vow of seeing new things throughout the day. And some of these videos that I see, I just uploaded in the thing. Plus, in the School of Athens, that's the best place I can engage people, really. You know, like I'm available 24/7 because it's connected to my phone. You know, like that's something. But aside from that, guys, it's just an attempt at building a community where communication can at some point be moved towards some advanced stride. You know. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. And let me see. Oh no. All right. Yo, guys. Little did the artist know Maslow's hierarchy of needs was like a pyramid in the back. Like this this Maslow's hierarchy of needs can totally, if it just had different colors, it could be seen as a pyramid, maybe like 100 meters to the shoulder of this robot. You know, look at how much there is geometrical variation in perception. That means there's our inner realms have a unique geometrical infinite momentum. And knowledge is really kind of like some of these geometrical explorations in the future, they're just in the darkness. And it's our evolutionary kind of vision that is the light that kind of we see more and we know more, and even though the questions become deeper, but our comprehension of the answers leads to more sophisticated ways of life. Because a life form that has to live, its activities are part of its health. And I've understood this on many levels, you know. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.